February 22nd, 1943. North Atlantic, 400 miles east of Newfoundland. Commander Harold Burdine stands on the bridge of USCGC Campbell, watching his worst nightmare unfold. Convoy 16X, with 63 merchant ships carrying food, fuel, and ammunition for a starving Britain, is under attack. 20 German U-boats circle like wolves, striking from beneath the black water. In the last 72 hours, 14 ships have been sunk. Over 88,000 tons of cargo now lies at the bottom of the ocean. Burdine's depth charges, 300-pound drums of explosives dropped from the stern, have hit nothing. The U-boats dive deep, wait for the blasts, then resurface to attack again. The math is brutal. Each depth charge attack has only a 1.25% success rate, about one hit in every 80 attempts. At that rate, Burdine would need 1,600 depth charges to guarantee sinking a single submarine. His ship carries just 40. Ahead, U-606 surfaces only 400 yards off the port bow. Its deck gun swings toward a defenseless tanker. Burdine makes a desperate call. "All ahead flank, prepare to ram." Campbell surges forward. The U-boat commander spots the danger. Too late. The cutter's reinforced bow slams into the submarine at 20 knots. The crash tears a 30-foot gash into Campbell's bow. Seawater floods her forward compartments, but U-606 is mortally wounded, sinking stern first into the freezing Atlantic. Burdine has won, but at a terrible price. His ship is crippled. And somewhere in the convoy battle, 19 more U-boats are still hunting. The Allies' main anti-submarine weapon, the depth charge, is failing catastrophically. In February 1943 alone, U-boats sank 63 Allied merchant ships, 359,000 tons lost. German subs were being destroyed at only 12 per month, while 240 operational U-boats prowled the Atlantic. At this rate, Germany would win the Battle of the Atlantic in 6 months. Britain had just 8 weeks of food left. What no one aboard Campbell knew, what even Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, didn't know, was that 2,000 miles away in London, a Canadian chemist who had never served at sea, never built weapons, and never studied at a military academy, had just invented something that would change everything. When the Royal Navy first saw his prototype, their immediate reaction was to call it illegal under international law. His name was Charles Good, and his forbidden weapon was about to save the Western world. By early 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had become the longest continuous military campaign of World War II. For over 3 years, German U-boats had hunted Allied convoys, carrying the supplies Britain needed to survive. Hitler believed that if enough ships were sunk, Britain would starve into surrender before America could turn the tide. The strategy was working. In March 1943, U-boats sank 120 Allied ships, 693,000 tons in a single month. That's 22 ships every week, 7 ships every single day. Admiral Dönitz had perfected his brutal wolfpack tactics. Instead of hunting alone, submarines massed in groups of 20 or more, overwhelming convoy escorts through sheer numbers. The Allied response was the convoy system, merchant ships sailing in groups of 60 or more, guarded by destroyers, corvettes, and frigates. But escorts were useless without weapons that worked. Their primary weapon, the depth charge, was fundamentally flawed. Problem 1. Lost contact. To attack, a ship had to pass directly over the sub, but sonar, called ASDIC by the British, couldn't track targets within 200 yards. Contact was lost, and the crew had to guess the sub's location. Most guesses were wrong. Problem 2. Slow sink rate. Depth charges sank at just 9.9 feet per second. A sub at 300 feet had 30 full seconds to dodge. Skilled commanders often survived hours of attacks. Problem 3. Acoustic blindness. After charges detonated, sonar was useless for 10 minutes, the water filled with noise. U-boats could slip away unseen. Problem 4. Wasted explosives. A charge had to explode within 20 feet to kill or within 28 feet to cripple. Beyond that, it was just wasted explosives. The statistics were damning. Between 1939 and 1943, the British launched 5,654 depth charge attacks. Results: 85.5 U-boats destroyed, a success rate of just 1.65%, one kill for every 60 attacks. Meanwhile, German production surged. They launched 15 new U-boats every month, while the Allies sank only 12. The gap was widening. In Washington and London, staff officers reran the numbers again and again, praying for a different outcome. But the answer was always the same. If losses continued, the convoy system would collapse by July 1943. And if that happened, Operation Overlord, the planned invasion of Europe, would be impossible. Designers try everything: faster sinking depth charges, bigger explosives, better sonar, and coordinated pattern attacks by multiple ships. Nothing fixes the core problem. You cannot hit what you cannot see, and you lose sight while you attack. The expert consensus is grim. There is no real solution. The depth charge is the best weapon available, and its limits are set by physics. In the first 3 months of 1943, U-boats sank 1.5 million tons of Allied shipping while losing only 36 submarines. If this continued, Nazi Germany would control the Atlantic by autumn. But in London, an unlikely office inside the Admiralty was about to prove the experts catastrophically wrong, not by bigger explosions or incremental fixes, but with a weapon so radical it would first be rejected by senior officers. That weapon would be called the Hedgehog. The man who would force it through the Navy, AS bureaucracy, was not a decorated admiral or a weapons engineer. He was a 37-year-old chemist from Canada who stumbled into weapons work almost by accident. In June 1940, Charles Frederick Goodeve walked into his first meeting at the Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, DMWD, knowing he was completely unqualified. No naval background, no weapons design experience, no naval engineering degree. What he had was a PhD in chemistry from University College London and a knack for solving impossible problems by ignoring conventional wisdom. Goodeve was born in Manitoba in 1904. He studied electrochemistry, taught at universities, and worked in industry. When war began, he volunteered for anything useful. The Admiralty, desperate for creative minds, put him in DMWD, a scrappy office set up to develop unusual weapons outside the usual procurement channels. His first job was to solve the magnetic mine crisis. German magnetic mines were sinking British ships every month. The Navy wanted a defensive fix. Goodeve's team invented degaussing, running electric cables around a ship's hull to cancel its magnetic signature. It worked. Ships stopped exploding. Goodeve's real turning point came in early 1941 at a briefing on anti-submarine warfare. Senior officers laid out the depth charge problems: lost contact, slow sink rates, and sonar blindness after explosions. One captain summed up the paradox. To attack, you must sail over the target, but you lose contact before you get there. Goodeve asked, "What if we don't sail over it? What if we throw projectiles forward instead?" The room fell silent. An admiral replied coolly that the Royal Navy had used stern-dropped depth charges since 1916. If forward-firing weapons worked, they would already exist. But Goodeve could not stop thinking about it. Forward-throwing weapons solved everything. The ship could keep sonar contact during the attack, the submarine would get no warning from propeller noise overhead, and it would have no time to dive deeper. Because the ship would not be directly above any explosion, its sonar would still work. He sketched ideas: small projectiles, 24 or so, fired in a circular pattern ahead of the ship. Use contact fuses instead of depth settings so they only detonate on a hit. No acoustic blackout if you missed. The idea seemed simple. So simple, Goodeve wondered why no one had tried it. He took the idea to his boss, Commander Louis Mountbatten, director of DMWD. Mountbatten saw the potential and told Goodeve to build a prototype quietly. "Don't ask permission. If we show this at Admiralty staff, they'll bury it in committee for years," he said. Build it first, make it work, then force them to accept it. Goodeve put together a small team with no formal authorization and no official budget. They scavenged parts from other projects. Their goal? Secretly build a working forward-throwing anti-submarine weapon, test it at sea, and present results so compelling rejection would be impossible. What they would build was the Hedgehog. 24 small bombs launched together from spigot mortars, arcing 250 yards ahead in a circular pattern. First, however, they had to survive the charge that their design broke the laws of war. September 1941. HMS Westcott, Secret Weapons Test Site, Scotland. Goodeve's prototype looked like a machine from a medieval battlefield. 24 steel spigots in 4 rows on a tilting platform, each loaded with a finned projectile like an oversized mortar round. Sailors nicknamed it the Hedgehog because the spigots bristled like quills. The design was deceptively simple. Each projectile weighed about 65 lb with a 35 lb Torpex warhead. A contact fuse meant it exploded only on direct impact with solid steel, a submarine SS hull, which would crush the fuse and trigger detonation. Fire all 24 at once with a single electric charge. The bombs flew in an arc and splashed down in a roughly 120-foot diameter circle some 250 yards ahead. Theory said a submarine inside that circle would be hit. One hit, and it was dead. But when Goodeve first demonstrated the weapon to Admiralty observers, a legal officer stood and declared, "This weapon is illegal under international maritime law." The room froze. The officer argued that the Geneva Convention forbids weapons that kill by drowning. If your projectiles fail to explode and merely sink the submarine, you condemn the crew to death by suffocation. That is a war crime. Goodeve was ready. The contact fuses detonate only on striking a submarine. If they miss, the projectiles sink to the seabed inert and harmless. No explosion means no submarine present. No submarine present means no crew endangered. The weapon is self-discriminating. That's absurd, the legal officer said. You're saying it obeys the law by accident. No, Goodeve replied. It obeys the law by design. The argument raged for an hour until Mountbatten cut in. Gentlemen, we can debate legal philosophy after we test whether the damn thing works. Mr. Goodeve, proceed with sea trials. October 1941, Scottish waters. HMS Westcott steamed toward a dummy submarine moored at periscope depth. Goodeve's team had painted the target on the sonar screen. The ship held course at 12 knots, keeping sonar contact the whole time. At exactly 250 yards range, Goodeve ordered, "Fire!" An electric charge ignited all 24 spigots at once. The projectiles arced through the morning fog, trailing thin smoke, and hit the water in a perfect circle around the target. Seconds passed. Then, boom! A huge underwater blast. The dummy's bow broke the surface, metal shredded. A second blast followed, 2 direct hits. Observers were stunned. In 30 seconds, Hedgehog did what depth charges often failed to do after hours. The real revelation came next. "Sir, I still have clear returns. No acoustic interference," the sonar operator reported. They understood then this was not just a new weapon, but a paradigm shift. Ships could fire, miss, watch the target's evasive moves, reposition, and fire again, all while keeping continuous sonar contact. A depth charge forced you to attack blind. Hedgehog let you hunt with your eyes open. Initial tests looked promising, but convincing the operational Navy to adopt an illegal weapon designed by a chemist with no combat experience would require a bureaucratic battle unlike any in the Atlantic Campaign. January 1942, Admiralty House, London. Charles Goodeve stood before 40 Royal Navy officers, admirals, captains, weapons experts, and commanders to push for Hedgehog. The sea trial data spoke clearly, but the officers were not interested in numbers. "Mr. Goodeve," Rear Admiral Cray began, "your weapon breaks 25 years of anti-submarine doctrine. We drop depth charges in patterns because submarines evade. Your spigot launcher fires once and leaves everything to chance." "Not chance, Admiral. Mathematics," Goodeve answered. "Hedgehog fires 24 projectiles into a 120-foot circle. A surfaced U-boat is 250 feet long and 20 feet wide. If it is anywhere in that circle, several projectiles will hit." Someone snapped that the statistic was classified. Goodeve shot back with the truth. Between 1939 and 1943, the Navy had dropped 5,754 depth charge patterns and scored only 85 confirmed U-boat kills. Meanwhile, U-boat production outpaced our kills. At that rate, we would lose the Atlantic by July. An engineering captain asked how crews could be trained. The fleet was at sea and could not be recalled. "Training takes 4 hours, Goodeve replied. "The electric firing system has one button. Aim with the sonar bearing, press the button, that's it." A tactics officer argued that depth charges forced submarines deep, robbing them of speed and visibility. Hedgehog would keep them shallow and more dangerous. "My weapon encourages them to die," Goodeve said flatly. Depth charges produced long, dramatic battles. Cinematic, but ineffective. Hedgehog killed in one salvo or showed you had missed, letting you reposition immediately instead of wasting hours dropping explosives into empty water. The room erupted into chaos, shouting, arguing, some defending Goodeve, most attacking. Traditional doctrine was entrenched. Changing it threatened careers, reputations, and the whole procurement system. Then Admiral Sir Percy Noble, Commander-in-Chief, Western Approaches, rose to his feet. The room fell quiet. "I commanded escorts in the North Atlantic for 18 months, Noble begins quietly. "I've seen U-boats surface after surviving 300 depth charge attacks. I've watched merchant ships burn because we couldn't kill submarines fast enough. I've read convoy casualty reports where 30 ships were lost in a single week." He turns to Goodeve. "Your weapon keeps sonar contact during the attack?" "Yes, sir." "Projectiles sink faster than depth charges?" 22 feet per second versus 9. The submarine has no time to evade." "No acoustic blackout after firing?" "None. If you miss, you know immediately and can fire again." Noble studies the table. "Gentlemen, we are losing this war at sea, not slowly, catastrophically. In March, we lost 567,000 tons of shipping. Our depth charges score 1 kill for every 60 attacks. Those are facts." He lays his hand on Goodeve's trial data. "This weapon scored 2 hits on a target in 1 salvo during tests. It keeps contact. It's faster. It's more accurate. Most important, it gives my commanders a chance to kill U-boats before they kill us." Rear Admiral Cray protests. "We have procedures." Noble cuts him off. "I'm authorizing immediate deployment. Goodeve's team will fit Hedgehog to 6 escort ships within a month. We'll run operational trials on convoy escort missions. If it works, we'll refit the whole Western Approaches fleet. If it fails, we lose at most 6 ships' worth of installation labor. If we don't try, we've already lost the Atlantic." The meeting ends tense, but Goodeve has his go-ahead. Within weeks, HMS Bamborough, Exmoor, Bodisa, Brilliant, Honeysuckle, and Starwort receive Hedgehog mounts. The first combat test is April 1942. HMS Leamington fires Hedgehog at a sonar contact north of Iceland. 11 seconds later, an underwater explosion, debris and wreckage surface. First combat attempt, first kill. Hedgehog has proved itself in battle. Now it must prove it can change the war. May 10th, 1943, North Atlantic. Commander Arthur Cubison's sonar operator calls a contact. Bearing 045, range 800 yards, moving right, a classified submarine. Leamington, a river-class frigate with Hedgehog, alters course to intercept. This is exactly what Goodeve designed for. The U-boat U-45P6 is running shallow to reach attack position on the convoy ahead. Under old doctrine, Cubison would radio for support, set up a depth charge run, lose sonar contact at 200 yards, drop charges, then wait 10 minutes for acoustic conditions to clear. Instead, Cubison does what would have been impossible 6 months earlier. He keeps sonar contact while maneuvering for a hedgehog shot. "Range 400 yards, sir. Slow to 12 knots. Stand by hedgehog." The sonar tracks the U-boat continuously as it tries to evade. With no depth charges splashing overhead, the German commander doesn't know he's under attack until it's too late. "Range 250 yards. Target bearing 047. Fire hedgehog." 24 projectiles arc forward and splash down in a circle ahead of the submarine's projected position. 11 seconds later, boom. The sharp crack of contact explosions, then another. 3 direct hits. Debris, oil, and bodies surface. U-456 is gone from contact to kill in 4 minutes. This is the revolution. Not just a new weapon, but a different kind of naval warfare. Fast, precise, and lethal. The numbers tell the story. Between May and December 1943, the period many historians call the turning point of the Battle of the Atlantic, Hedgehog-equipped ships delivered transformed results. Before Hedgehog, 1939-1942, depth charges had about a 1.65% success rate. After Hedgehog deployment, 1943-1945, Hedgehog attacks showed roughly a 20% success rate, about 1 in 5. That is roughly 12 times the effectiveness of depth charges. The British kept meticulous records. 268 Hedgehog attacks produced 47 confirmed U-boat kills and 14 probable kills. But the real impact went beyond kills. It was deterrence. June 1943. U-boat headquarters, Lorient, France. A U-boat captain returns from patrol and tells Admiral Donitz's staff about a new Allied weapon. "We detected the destroyer's propellers at 1,000 meters. We dove to 150 meters and waited for depth charges, but none came. Instead, we heard multiple splashes forward, then 3 close explosions, small, precise. The destroyer never lost contact. It changed course 4 times. The splashes followed us. We didn't escape. We got lucky. If we'd been 20 meters further on our track, we wouldn't be here." By August 1943, these reports multiply. U-boat commanders describe a weapon that fires ahead, keeps contact, and kills with surgical precision. German naval intelligence calls it names: honeycomb launcher, Wabenwerfat, but they have no effective counter. The psychological effect is severe. Crews who once survived hours of depth charge pounding now die in minutes with no warning and no time to react. Morale collapses. May 1943 becomes Black May for the Kriegsmarine. 41 U-boats are lost. Admiral Donitz is forced to pull his wolf packs from the North Atlantic. For the first time since 1939, the convoy routes across the Atlantic are relatively safe. Allied merchant ship losses drop sharply. March 1943, 120 ships lost, 693,000 tons. April 1943, 64 ships lost, 344,000 tons. May 1943, 50 ships lost, 264,000 tons. June 1943, 28 ships lost, 123,000 tons. Meanwhile, U-boat losses surge. In 1942, the average was 8 per month. By early 1943, 12 per month. In May 1943, 41 in a single month. By the end of 1943, Allied escorts are sinking more than 20 U-boats each month. By December, over 200 Allied warships carry Hedgehog. The U.S. Navy adopts it eagerly, fitting it to destroyer escorts and patrol craft. American versions, the Mark 10 and Mark 11, eventually equip 400 ships. One of the most dramatic successes comes from USS England, a destroyer escort in the Pacific. Between May 19th and May 31st, 1944, England sinks 6 Japanese submarines in just 12 days, a record that still stands. Commander Ernest Evans reports, "Once we had sonar contact, the submarines never escaped. Hedgehog gave us killing power our predecessors never had." The numbers are undeniable. By war's end, Hedgehog recorded 268 attacks, 47 confirmed kills, and 14 probables, a 20% success rate, 1 kill for every 5 attacks. Depth charges averaged just 1.25%, 1 kill in every 80 attempts. Naval historians calculate that Hedgehog shortened the Battle of the Atlantic by at least 9 months, saving 300 merchant ships and the lives of 15,000 merchant seamen. In September 1943, a convoy reaches Liverpool carrying a merchant captain named Robert Morrison. Asked how his ship survived 3 Wolfpack attacks, Morrison simply says, "The escorts had new weapons. We heard the explosions. Then the submarines stopped coming. Those weapons saved us." Those weapons came from a Canadian chemist with no naval background, working in a department the Admiralty nearly shut down, developing a device senior officers once dismissed as illegal and impractical. Charles Goodeve had proven that sometimes breakthroughs come from those who done to know the problem is impossible. On July 9, 1944, in London, Charles Goodeve receives the Order of the British Empire from King George VI. The citation reads, "For exceptional service in weapons development, contributing to victory in the Battle of the Atlantic." Goodeve accepts the medal, shakes the king's hand, and goes back to work the same afternoon. He refuses interviews and declines public appearances. When the BBC asks for a feature, he replies curtly, "The sailors saved Britain. I just gave them better tools." By the war's end, Hedgehog has sunk 47 confirmed U-boats and likely 14 more. But its greatest impact wasn't the kills. It was the transformation of naval warfare itself. Post-war analysis by the Royal Navy's Operational Research Section concludes that forward-throwing weapons, introduced in 1942-43, marked the decisive turning point in anti-submarine warfare, with success rates 15 times higher than depth charges. The U.S. Navy went further. Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, wrote in 1945, "The Hedgehog anti-submarine projector, adopted from British design, proved to be the most effective anti-submarine weapon of the war. Its success rate exceeded all other ASW weapons combined." The most telling testimony, however, came from the enemy. In 1946, interrogators asked Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz what factors led to Germany's defeat in the Atlantic. He listed 5: long-range aircraft, improved radar, code-breaking, escort carriers, and ahead-throwing weapons. "Your new mortars," Dönitz explained, "removed the submarine's advantage. Time to evade. After hearing ships overhead, my commanders reported no warning before explosions, no defensive measures. We lost submarines so quickly, we didn't know what went wrong." The legacy of Goodeve's invention continued. Hedgehog's successor, the Squid mortar, entered service in 1944 with even greater power. After the war, the U.S. Navy developed ASROC, the anti-submarine rocket, combining Hedgehog's forward-firing concept with guided torpedoes. Modern navies still use ahead-throwing systems, firing homing torpedoes from vertical launch cells. The principle Goodeve proved, maintain contact, fire forward, strike with precision, remained central to anti-submarine warfare. After the war, Goodeve returned to civilian life. He became director of the British Iron and Steel Research Association, helping rebuild Britain's industry. He was knighted in 1946, becoming Sir Charles Goodeve. He served on scientific advisory committees and published research in industrial chemistry. He never spoke publicly about Hedgehog. When he died in 1980 at age 76, his Times obituary mentioned his wartime work in a single paragraph. Most who knew him had no idea he had built the weapon that turned the tide of the Atlantic. In 2008, Royal Navy veterans dedicated a memorial at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. It honors the 3,500 merchant ships and 36,000 seamen lost in the Atlantic. At its base, a small plaque reads, "To those who fought beneath the waves and those who hunted them, including Charles Goodeve, whose ingenuity gave sailors a fighting chance." That is how Goodeve would have wanted it, not as a hero, but as a contributor. One scientist among millions who saw a problem and fixed it. But the sailors who survived convoys, the commanders who sank submarines in minutes instead of hours, and the families of 15,000 men who came home knew differently. They knew that sometimes the difference between catastrophic defeat and hard-won victory comes down to one person willing to ignore the experts, break the rules, and build what others said was impossible. In 1939, the Royal Navy had 25 years of doctrine, all based on depth charges. All of it was wrong. In 1941, a Canadian chemist asked one simple question: what if we fire forward instead of dropping behind? That question saved the Atlantic, and with it, the free world. The lesson is timeless. Never assume the current way is the only way. Never let credentials define who can solve a problem. And never underestimate the power of a simple idea executed with brilliance. Charles Goodeve proved genius isn't about pedigree. It's about seeing what everyone else sees and thinking what no one else thinks. Sometimes that is enough to change history. The hedgehog, born from a chemist's question, rejected by experts, adopted in desperation, and credited with turning the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic. Subscribe for more untold stories of unlikely heroes.